Well, hi. This is sort of a bonus episode. I decided not to put this into a book form. I decided not to write it because, well, I like the first movies too much. That's why I wrote the third one. But it'll never be turned into one because, they got producers and whatnot. So I decided I'll go and give you my cliff notes that I wrote up to the point so far. That pretty much gave you the gist of the whole movie. Once you hear it, you'll know the whole movie. Just it won't have the ex- walking experience, I suppose, the best we could come up with. So, here we go. Sherlock Holmes, Part 3. First off, we're going to deal with Watson. His wife was murdered. Watson was running late. He's nearly the first on the scene. Basically, is the first on the scene, other than witnesses. Watson takes footprints. He takes the sketches of the footprints, weapon diameter of the wife. He finds out all the information he can from a medical perspective and goes to Holmes. Sherlock deduces the shoes tell what type, okay? So the shoes will tell you what type it came from. By the look of it, you can tell what it's made of. You can tell how much it cost. You can tell a few things from the shoe itself. It'll tell the size, how the depth of tell how much it weighed, the direction of the feet. It says a lot of things about the physical attributes of the person who did it. Okay, remember this isn't a okay. Question, motive, Watson's Holmes' wife. Wife's friend or other psychological scars. Alright. Basically, Watson has to find out, Holmes has to find out who is all tied to the wife. What are the reasons that she would have been murdered at that point? There's a few options. Was it because of Sherlock? Was it because of Holmes? Or was it because of Watson? Was it because of her? Was it random? There's a bunch. Now, dealing with Holmes's technique. Fungus defeats fisherman. Always. He has two different ways of working out every case. He have his 7 deadly sins. The 7 deadly personality profiling. Sloth equals mischievous pursuits. Lust equals oh, okay, that's what I wrote down. I'm sorry, I got dogs barking, which is one more than usually a problem. But right, it's sloth, meticulous pursuits. Lust, meticulous pursuits. Wrath equals meticulous pursuits. Avarice equals gluttony equals meticulous pursuits. Envy, pride. For every person, right? So you have to find out for each person what is their sloth, what is their lust, what is their wrath. Each one of those pursuits do not tie to another piece. I thought I had that more wrote down. So you have the sloth. What is their you have to find it for each one. What do they lust over? Is it money? Is it revenge? Is it books? And that answer will never be in another one of the categories. So after the 7 deadly sins profiling, you end up with the who, what, when, where, why mystery solving checklist, which is to learn every who, you need to know every what, ready every when, defeat everywhere, distinguish every why. And between those two things, personality profiling and situation profiling, you can end up with a pretty much sure deal on what the situation is. Alright, sorry about that. Now, back to the point. Sherlock Holmes uses both of those things to solve every case he gets into. The Seven Deadly Sins personal profile and the who, what, when, where, why situation profile. Right? Though those are his keys. So, in this one, in Sherlock Holmes 3, at this point, he leaves Watson. Holmes is in disguise 70% of the movie, 30 different looks. He goes total underground, leaves Watson to himself. Because anybody who read the books know that Watson was sort of an apprentice to him. He was looking for a successor more than a partner. He's looking for someone to, with his same skills, to go out and do what he does. So, Watson, being left alone, not knowing any of that, his wife just died. He's emotional wreck. Goes and sees it just over. You know, what's Holmes doing? This is supposed to be the most important thing in the world. And he disappears. He leaves without giving any hint, any clue, any whatsoever information to tell Watson what to do. So, Watson, being a medical doctor, decides to put his 2 cents to work. You know, he hasn't been to... Anybody who watches or has read the books would tell you that Watson solved most of the cases anyway. That Holmes wasn't the real ones. Not until the episode 1 and 2, which comes in at the end of the books, would you ever suggest, or was it ever suggested that, other than Holmes's brilliance, ever really solved the cases? It's a little, and I might be wrong, but everybody's point of view, you know? So, Watson seeks witnesses, people, carriage drivers, store owners, everything around the area. He wasn't far behind her. He wasn't far behind his wife. So, what would Holmes do? He knows that the people in the area, that it had to happen fast. So it's gonna really go and mess up the whole spiel. I'm trying to find anyone who knows anything. Then we have Watson, good at tying loose ends and finding which are dead ends. But he knows, following Holmes, that 85% of everything is speculation until verified. Holmes, who has been also testing multiple people up until this point, has decided to recruit his cop friend. You know, everybody knows him from the mustache, from the movies, the guy with the mustache. You know, he's had him in his sights for a while now, and decides to use him as sort of the attaché, whatever the word is, to follow Watson secretly, without being seen, you know, to help Watson stay out of trouble and to keep him informed. Watson knows, he knows how the cop will overcome. Oh, Watson, or Holmes, will be watching the cop. The cop doesn't know that. Holmes is curious how the cop will come up to terms with hunting Watson while being unseen. Will he use disguises? Will he use people? Will he, Holmes is curious about how he will act in a situation such as this. Anybody might not realize, but we're dealing with the 17th century English police force. They didn't use guns. They didn't, they blew whistles and ran after people and all herded together. So this is a very diverse change from the literal, what you would call police. Okay. Now, Holmes, while doing all this, checks out the shoe designer who made the shoe, goes and checks the shoe shops to see if anybody recognizes the pattern, because any shoe owner would have pride in their work. They would know their designs by their signatures they put in it. It's what craftsmen do. Shoe shop. You end up finding out if it's a high society shoe, a low society shoe. Holmes, being the problem solver of the world, asks all of his allies, all of the rich people he helps. You know him. He doesn't ask for friends. He doesn't ask for money. But and people who have been helped by him really are helped. He seeks out to solve serious cases. He's not just a fly-by-night, call me if your dog ran away. So you end up with a lot of people who are his allies, who like to help him and watch out for him, because they were things the rich couldn't solve. The rich have a self-centered, we're better than everyone, we can watch the details no one else would see attitude. And when they get beat and someone helps them, they in return put their skills to him. Alright. Find anyone who's on duty during the time. Right? He uses the rich people to help him find anyone who wasn't working or on duty. Anyone who might have seen someone walking around who wouldn't. Anyone did not draw suspicion, because he doesn't know who he's looking for. He doesn't know if it's a male or a woman. He doesn't know what job they go to. So he has to throw a big net around the whole thing to find out what's happening. Well, all this time, the cop was been following Watson, and Watson has started getting over his head. He's accusing gangs in the area and really not covering his bases. He's a little too hot-headed on this. And the cop has to go and tell Holmes that, there's a serious problem here. In this one, I really want to paint Sherlock Holmes as the 000 agent, as the person who gets to 007. You got the 00, the 001, the 002, and then you have 007 who has the license to kill. Okay, so everybody knows Sherlock isn't going to use a gun. And come to find out that his recruiting is for M, his brother.
What the hell are you talking
to? Okay, you have to remember, I haven't got this one wrote yet, but we're dealing with a time before the special agents, the 00, before the Mission Impossible, before M. The special operations officer even exists. Holmes's brother is keeper of the broom closet, which technically is the same thing because he works apart from the military forces. But, all in retrospect, the 00 isn't set up to its mission parameters. It doesn't have the people who are the information getters. It doesn't have the people who clean up afterwards. All the 007 things we have seen so far only ever deal with 007. Made out to be this lone wolf who works alone. And even though he does, He is the first of the Double O. He is the lowest ranked member. He is one of the highest MI6 operatives, but he has overcome those because MI6 are the ones who gather the information, learn mission strategy by watching the Double O. Okay? So, he is the license to kill. He's the one who gets the gun. He's the one who gets to decide where the goes from here. As he works his way up the Double O ranks until he gets to the 00 Sherlock Holmes level. Okay, so with that being said, the cop had told Holmes that Watson was getting over his head, and the gangs have really started to get sick of him pushing his nose around. Because anybody who knows a gang knows that it doesn't matter what you're pushing your nose around them for, they're doing too much to want you there, period. So Holmes calls his brother, and asks him to clean up the mess, to get that all sorted out, looking out for Watson. Well, Watson comes up on a point where he's out of ideas, out of clues. His experience is really, and he takes out his aggression in the Fight Club, like Holmes does. And, the betting, the fight, and you actually get to see Watson, shirt off, bloody. It's amazing. Okay. Watson, afterwards, really has to sit down and starts contacting his friends in the police force. He knows Holmes does that. It didn't discourage him to put himself into such a low place. It was more trying to let's talk about like how Holmes will do a drug to open his mind up. But anybody who knows Holmes knows that that might be what Watson thinks he's doing, but that's not really what Holmes is doing. Holmes just burns everything to see the color of its fire. He tastes everything to notice how it tastes, so that when he gets drugged or he gets drunk or he still has enough experience on that liquid, on that drug, to maintain a reasonable cognitive list of things he still has to do to help him get away. So as he can play the fool and everybody else thinks of him as the fool, he's really not much different than he would be anyway, which is why he's so formidable. Holmes, also coming to an end, has coming to his aggression. His aggression's coming too much. He goes and solves 3 cases right during the same thing quickly, help trying to expand his mind through the options. Holmes deals with a lot of visual imagery in his head during the profiling, during the things, thinking of his life. Everybody knows his string wall, connecting ties together, trying to keep references on things. Well, what else? Hold on. Watson pulls a mind-altering help, but not helpful. So, Watson really trying to get into, his friends, everybody. It's not helping. So Holmes and Watson are coming to a point where they're realizing that the person who killed his wife is either in some heavy secret society or some real homeless nobody. These are the options are wearing thin on where the strings could lie. Now, Holmes hunted Moriarty for a long time, and both movies were encompassing that. It was the time in between. They make it seem real short, but he had to go long ways to figure out his stuff. And Holmes learns one of the three breaking and entering, learns one of the three things he needs to know to solve this. Uh, Using a breaking and entering case in the nearby area, stole low value items. Non-current job thief follows leads to what helps him solve the case. So, you use the police reports from the area in the past so long, the month or two, on seeing who's been getting angry in the area. Not really, while Watson took a real prescription point of view. Holmes is able to go and get into the sewers. He's able to go and talk to the people just about their daily lives. Who's been getting an attitude lately, who's been acting different, there's a lot of murders during this time. This was all the time of Alice in Wonderland, of Jack the Ripper. So uh, the England of the past is not the loving BBC America we know and love today. It was a dark place where the separation of good road, bad road was an entire class shift. So the darker you go, the less you're going to find out, because nobody's going to tell on their neighbor, because, well, why would they want to put up with it? So, cop caught by drunken Watson. Okay, so Watson gets Watson gets drunk, loses the whole fucking of what to do. He can't live up to Holmes. Holmes's life is flashing through his eyes. Anybody who read the first book knows he's been like a puppy to Holmes. Loves how he knows everything about everything and never realized the length of the intensity that Holmes goes into it. He never puts that together. Why does Holmes know that there's a bump near the smell of the cinnamon bun that time a day? It's because ever since he was a kid, him and his brother make it a habit of leading this life. They know every sewer because they played in every sewer. They know every street, every bump in the road, every person because they've been friends. Well, in the TV show Cheers, everybody knows your name, right? It's the same thing. They make it a point, a habit of doing it so much that the average person just overlooks. That he knows why the sewer system was broke. He knows because he was there. He knows the people who've seen it happen. Okay. Now, Holmes is still trying to... The cop might have been caught, but he served his purpose. And he wasn't expecting anything because he hasn't taught him anything. It's just been observation. Now, so, Holmes starts steering a bit of evidence towards Watson because he's not trying to solve the case. He's trying to get Watson to see how he handles a situation without him in it. Right, and Watson, in summation, to stay doctor, not, right? So, because he's been drifting more into becoming a doctor and a husband than the detective Holmes had him planned to be. He's seen it in him that the fascination was to be a detective. That's why he took the medical field. He was a problem solver. And that's what Holmes looks for. He looks for the people who can use deductive reasoning and weed out dead ends, loose evidence. The non, Watson might not have the seven deadly sins profile or the who, what, when, where situation profile, but who does, right? They haven't spent the last 30 years traveling around the world, learning all the new drugs that are being used, using all the new. I mean, Holmes's wall had newspapers from all around the country, from all around the world. He knew the Egyptians used the stuff because he has an eidetic memory. He goes and uses it in a way to build his repertoire, his portfolio of things to do and use, and because they're the stuff he would use. I mean, Moriarty used the milk and honey to break out and make it seem like he broke out of a 10-ton stone thing that was holding the coffin down, when really it was all just fake. It was paper. You might as well consider it. It's because illusion, the wizard makes the stuff, the magician uses the stuff. Holmes might not be a wizard, but a magician has to be profound in his understanding of it, and technically be able to make one himself, even though they don't. They don't. So, uh, in the end, you just find out the guy's a nobody, just some angry, drunk guy who just got paid less than he was supposed to, was looking for a whore to pick up, and she just happened to be in the wrong alley. It sucks, but it's Watson's wife. Of course, it sucks. Who are you, right? Um, and I mean, between jumping between Holmes's memories of childhood, going through the sewers, acting like a dirty homeless nobody, learning how people act, and doing the three cases in the middle of this one as you're watching Watson go through a complete psychological trauma and seeing how he turns out. Like I said, it's not rote. I don't really know if I want Watson 2. I think without his wife, he's going to put a lot of extra into it. I think that this one movie is not enough to proclaim him 00 worthy despite his past with Holmes. I think that he might be too psychologically scarred from this event to ever make him truly. He could be a great doctor, but doctors in the 1800s weren't exactly all something to write home about. So you could technically have him follow that path on the forefront of medical engineering and come up with antiperspirants, for all I know, which would be great for him. He was a brilliant man. He was it's something that's not out of his reach, of his realm. Just like the Fight Club. A lot of people would say he might not do that, but he is part of a rugby team. A rugby team is a head-butting, ball-kicking, horrible fight club in itself. So you can't say he doesn't have that in him. It all fits. All the pieces are there. It's just it needed the 00 aspect. That would be remained highly secretive until and until you start talking to the brother, until you start talking and realizing that the broom cupboard of what that really entailed. I think he would have been more of a number 2. Um, I always liked the idea of M being who she was, right? Judy, because as time goes by, the old BBC TV show, her and her husband, she was a temp office. She sent temp people out to, in temporary jobs. And her husband was the military, well, out in the jungle guy who wrote books. And they even made the reference to that. He was in the one movie with this as a sub driver, general, whatever. And she made the joke in Skyfall about her husband was a poet. See, I think the broom cupboard is more of not really the M, but the role that Mallory played before he became M. Because 007 isn't 006. 006 isn't 005. By the time you get to 001, that's sort of the Jack Sparrow from Pirates of the Caribbean aspect role. The person who only has one bullet in his gun, and can pretty much line up situations so that he can not need men following him. Well, that's pretty much all of it. I think I got the entire basis for the entire movie out. And probably better than they would have ever wrote, as y'all would probably agree by this point. Well, here's to you and the future to come. Thank you. The end.